Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Belinda Carr Show. Today, we're talking about modular construction. So, there are a lot of confusing, similar terms thrown out there when it comes to modular construction. There's prefab, there's offsite, there's build with Legos, there is modular construction itself, and it's all pretty muddled.
Yeah, modular construction is this. It's kind of like Ken Simler, who we spoke with in a previous podcast. He talked about how it's starting to grow in the past 20 years, but before that, it was the redheaded stepchild. So it's gotten a lot of popularity in the past 20 years, but people still don't know what to do with it right now.
It's like an elusive silver bullet to our problems right now. But everyone's approaching it from different angles, defining it in different ways, and there's not much clarity.
It's kind of like 3D printed concrete right now. I mean, it's very exploratory. There's a lot of different companies doing various different things, and the most popular idea right now is to just build walls for a home. But as we spoke about in a previous podcast, that may not be the right answer for it. With modular construction, I think that the answer's there. We're just trying to figure out how to incorporate it, how to have it take over conventional construction.
I completely agree. Right now, there are many companies building the same way that people build out on job sites, just doing it in a factory. And is that the best thing to do? I don't think so. I mean, it's just we need to take the next step to possibly automate the process, build differently, not do the same thing that we're doing out on job sites just in a factory and call it offsite or modular construction.
It's really confusing to me. There's so many modular construction companies out there. Like you said, there's so many factories of people doing this, and it's been going on for a long time. Why hasn't it caught up? Because there's always this they always treat it as something that is better quality because it's done off-site and potentially cheaper. So why isn't that done? Why isn't it replacing conventional construction yet?
So when you watch TV shows like Grand Designs, and they show these futuristic, quirky homes that are built in Europe, many times those are off-site modular construction techniques, and they usually source all their walls and everything in these factories in Eastern Europe, and then they transport it to London or Spain or something like that. They seem to have a better grasp on modular construction and automation in factories than the US does.
I would expect that that's because in Eastern Europe it's cheaper to have these factories and to build than it is in these expensive places like France and England and Spain. And so they source everything from Eastern Europe and bring it over because it would be outrageous. So I guess their labor is so expensive in those countries that they have to outsource it, and they don't want to bring those workers to the countries to do that labor. They would rather build it off-site and then bring it and then just have the expensive labor do the simple connecting the Legos.
Why didn't that happen here? Like if we had facilities in South America or Mexico or something, and then all those components were transported to the US, similar to what's happening in Europe, is that transportation costs are just so high because the US is so much larger.
I mean, even within the United States, we have countries like California where things are a lot more expensive, or New York. Why aren't these offsite facilities? And it may be the case. They're in these less expensive states and the components are brought, but it's still just not as popular. And is that just because we have so much wealth in the States and so much excess money that we're able to do these conventional style buildings?
Or building codes prevent or like deter offsite construction, modular construction. They want they're in cahoots with all the lobbyists and stuff.
Does it go back to the perception of manufactured homes? Because when you say modular construction, a lot of people will think manufactured homes, which is mobile homes. And then you think trailer parks, like trashy trailer parks. And people don't want that. And so that perception is still,
It's hard to change that perception.
yeah, it's interfering with modular construction, the good type of modular construction, growing and outpacing conventional construction.
And it's important to know that not everything can be done in a factory. To make sure that these walls are perfectly leak proof and finishes are consistent and all that, certain things have to be done on the job site. So I think we still have to draw that line. So in the grand scheme of things, people be like, okay, if I have to put in countertops and put in backsplashes and finish my drywall out on job site, what are you really offering me in the factory? I might as well just do all of it out on the job site and just be done with it.
Some people believe that modular construction is just something that's 100% complete, comes to the job site, put together, that's your home. And then, oh, by the way, you can just take it apart and move it somewhere else and put it back together again. But that's not the right use case for modular construction.
It's funny you say that because there are so many comments on that stupid shipping container video where people say, oh, you just completely ignore the fact that you can lift your home and transport it to the next site once if you want to move. And I'm like, how many times are you actually going to do that? That is one of those cool ideas where you watch these videos out on the internet and where they're lifting a shipping container pool, lifting a home and bringing it here, bringing it there. But in reality, you're not going to do it. So what's the point?
Think about how detrimental foundation work is to your conventionally built home. And now take that and do that with a home and move it multiple places, hundreds of miles. Imagine, you're going to have to refinish everything on the interior.
Yeah, because things are going to twist and shake when it's being transported. You probably get drywall cracks. And it's been done in the past. Obviously, like in San Francisco, there was this historic home that was just basically cut off from its foundation, transported down a street a couple of blocks away and set somewhere else on a different site.
And that's the thing. It can be done, but it is not the right use for it. Like in specific, like that's probably very expensive to do.
Yeah, it costs over $500,000 just to move it a few blocks.
Which is great for historic preservation. It's amazing we can do that kind of stuff. But your home is not a piece of historic preservation.
Your shipping container home is not a historic home. So I recently spoke to the CEO of a modular construction company in Pennsylvania that's creating row homes with offsite construction. Okay, so today we have Brian Gaudio, CEO of Module in Pittsburgh. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Excited to be here. Thanks, Belinda.
So you have a background in architecture and you've started Module, which is basically building affordable housing, energy efficient housing through offsite construction. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That was the goal with Module.
That was the goal, or it still is? Have you had to evolve, like going through the realities of like affordable housing, and it's not as easy as you thought it was when you got in, I'm sure.
Exactly. That's, I'm trained as an architect, and my goal is how do we bring good design to more people? That was my goal, going through architecture school, working in the practice afterwards. So I was doing a lot of work. We were bringing design to areas of deep need. And so in starting Module, that is our goal, is how do we create better housing solutions, more attainable housing solutions? I think what we've learned over the years is that affordable housing is a complex problem that is not just about construction costs. It's about zoning and planning. It's about financing. It's about appraisals. So there's so many aspects of it. We are a part of the solution, but there is no silver bullet to it. That's one of the things that I think we've learned over the last several years, is that that problem, how complex it is.
And and I completely agree with you, because going through architecture school as well, both from a bachelor's and master's, the problem was oversimplified. It was always, if modular construction is the silver bullet, and we came out with these pretty unrealistic box structures that could be stacked and create houses and apartments and hospitals, and that is the solution. Why isn't everyone doing that? And it's far more complex than that. Once you step out into the real world, that's when you realize how theoretical all your projects were in architecture school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And I think, I was someone who was very interested in public interest design. So there was a group called the Social Economic Environmental Design Network, SEED network, that I was involved with. And after graduating, a friend and I were very interested in exploring how designers were working on affordability in markets outside the US. So we received a grant from our university to travel and see architecture anywhere in the world. And we chose to go where there were no architects. That's what we told the school. And they're like, wait, you can't do that. We're giving you money to talk about architecture. So that was our initial proposal, was to find architecture without architects. And we were going to go to South America, to the favelas, and some of the barriadas there, to see some of the incremental housing work that was happening.
And you all did a documentary on your experiences there, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was, some of my experiences to innovative models for affordable housing was this documentary film. So a friend and I went down to South America with this university grant, and then we raised some money through crowdfunding to film some of the leading architects and design firms that were working on affordable housing solutions in these cities. So there's a firm called Elemental that's in Santiago. They did this really interesting incremental housing solution, and I was fascinated by that solution.
And is that where the house grows with the family? That's what you mean by incremental? Okay.
That's right. So in that case, a lot of people were building homes themselves because they couldn't get a mortgage. They just saved up enough money to build one room, would save enough money to build a second room, pay as they went. Some architecture firms saw that sort of concept in the wild, so to speak, and out people just doing it, and said, this is a great idea. How can we design buildings to be added onto? So there's some really cool projects in South America that we went to see that had implemented that incremental housing with some assist from a design professional. So those ideas, graduating from school, seeing some of the work in Latin South America, were really inspiring to me, and is part of what inspired me and my co-founders to start Module. And our initial concept was actually a home that grows with you. And we had patented a roof that you could pop off and add more stories. So this was our solution for affordable housing. And then we went out and talked to banks, and they're like, you're going to do what? You're going to take the roof off? That is not a good idea. We'll never give you a loan for that. So I think we had to adjust our initial concept to, let's call it, the cultural and social norms of how the United States builds.
Was that difficult? Like, I'm sure you came in with all these aspirations and this energy and creativity, and then to hear no from the first person you talked to, and like, was that defeating in a way? Like, how did you take that as a challenge and then just try to evolve your business and try to find another solution?
Yeah, I think we ended up trying to listen to, a good startup should understand their customers and understand their pain points. And I think the idea of a home that grows with you is incredible, and people still talk to us about it, and we do have a patent on this. But I think the pain point that we were hearing from people is the existing homes that are on the market do not fit my needs. And that's not just like a millennial coming into entering the home ownership. That's a baby boomer whose kids are gone and they're looking to downsize. So what we heard was, the homes on the market don't represent me, and the new homes that are being built are of really poor quality, and they're way too big for me. So people were looking for like this Goldilocks right-sized home, and they cared about the things they were putting in that home, right? So thinking about the materials that are going to that home, the energy performance of that home, those were the things we were hearing from them. So really we had modified our kind of strategy. Rather than incremental housing, it was right-sized housing built in a factory that's super energy efficient, that's going to keep your operating costs low over time. So that was kind of one of the evolutions, and a couple of different evolutions that we've had over the years from start to where we are today.
So when did you all start? Was it 2019 or 2018?
No, we started in 2016.
Oh, okay.
I moved back to Pittsburgh, and with the idea of let's build a home that grows with you, and called up my old shop teacher to let me use the 3D printer at our high school. Um, and that was when we started, was 2016. And we've gone through some incubator programs and things since then. And the idea and concepts evolved as we built projects.
Okay. So was your first project the Latham house?
That's right, the Latham House.
Okay.
Well, that's the first home we built. Prior to that, we actually built what we call our demo unit, which with the funds we had, if your product is a house, it's one of the most expensive things to prototype, right? Like you can have beautiful renderings, but people need to see and walk through something. So the very first thing we built was my co-founder, Hallie, who had worked in kind of a woman-owned construction business before joining Module. She built this 200 square foot backyard home office space that we built it in a lumber warehouse. When I say she, she built it in a lumber yard, and it was designed in two pieces that it could fit on the back of a flatbed. And then we would move it to different areas around the city and have these pop-ups and show people this concept. So that was the first thing we built. That was 2017. But first client home that was a real permanent home was 2019, the Latham House.
And that wasn't the row home style that you've now evolved to, right?
Correct. That house was essentially like an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
In Pittsburgh, those aren't legal. But in this case, the client bought a separate lot that sat behind their house where there was a garage previously, tore that down and built that single story home.
So why did y'all move to the row home style? Was that something your clients and customers were asking for? Or is that the vernacular style in Pittsburgh?
I'm looking out the window because I'm in our show home space here right now. And that is the vernacular. So with the case of Pittsburgh, we were a Rust Belt industrial city that boomed during the steel industry, right? So what Silicon Valley, the software industry is to Silicon Valley, steel was to Pittsburgh. So we had twice the population in the heyday of Pittsburgh. And in the 1980s, when the steel industry died in the United States, effectively, people left the city in droves. And when they left the city, these homes became abandoned, condemned, and were torn down. So Pittsburgh has 30,000 roughly vacant lots in the city core, not in the surrounding suburbs, but they're all over the city. And they're these kind of scars in the urban fabric. So we designed a product, which is a row home product, to repair those scars, if you will, and bring back housing units onto those formerly vacant lots.
That's very interesting because I've been to Pittsburgh twice, and you can feel the history when you're there. We visit the Cary blast furnaces, which was
cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful site. I really recommend that to everyone. But you can feel the history. You can tell that it's been through really rough times, and it was such an industrial, like soot-filled city, and they've basically cleaned it all up, and they're trying to revitalize it now. To see you acknowledge its past, but bring it into the present through automation or through off-site construction is very interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And so we feel that there's a lot of cities like Pittsburgh that have had that, let's call it that traumatic event, whether it's Detroit in the auto industry or Pittsburgh in steel. There's a lot of cities that are trying to figure out how do we repurpose ourselves. And so the product that we're developing is a way to turn those vacant lots that are often 20 feet by 60 to 100 feet. So they're skinny lots. How do they bring those back onto the tax bases? How do they revitalize neighborhoods? So that's part of our goal with developing this product, if you will. And
those kind of dimensions and proportions work really well with offsite construction.
Correct. That's right. So a lot of, maybe we'll call it more traditionally built homes are thinking for something that's wider. But in our case, right, I won't do a full virtual tour here, but so this is our product. So it's 16 feet wide. This one is 36 feet long. And we built 3 of these here on this part of town, market and affordable housing. So 16 feet wide, 40 feet deep, roughly. And we chose that dimension because that was basically the widest we could ship something on the road in Pennsylvania. And from a modular perspective, our homes are built primarily modular. We can do a lot of the finish work because we're not stitching multiple boxes together side by side. So a lot of the drywall work is done, flooring, because we're reducing the number of, let's call it mate walls on the sides, if you will. And on a 20-foot wide lot, if you have side setbacks, then you're going to be building about 16 feet anyway by right. So there's actually some advantages to that dimension.
So how much of it is done in the factory and how much is done on site? You talked about the drywall and flooring, but then the outside cladding and installing windows, what about that?
So in this house and in most of our homes, flooring is done in the factory, cabinet done in the factory, windows, drywall, plumbing, electrical, lighting. Really, in the inside of the house, what's left is the grouting for the tile, the countertop, the appliances, and then stitching the boxes together. So that's what's left inside the house. And I guess things like railings and accessories like that. On the outside of the house, what we're finding, because currently we work with existing modular factories, our plan is to have our own, but we're currently working with existing mod factories in different parts of the US. And the standard is that siding is done on site. So we'll do exterior insulation on our homes in the factory, but siding is done on site if you're using like a fiber cement product.
Okay. So when you'll build your homes, I've noticed, I went through your website and y'all don't have any gas connections. Y'all kind of future-proof the home so that if it does need to be off the grid or run completely on solar panels or some other forms of like renewable energy, it could be run that way in the future.
Correct. So we are a certified zero energy ready home builder with the Department of Energy. So we chose that, and part of that is an all electric home. So there's no gas or fossil fuels consumed. So the home being solar ready, we're using a lot of energy efficient HVAC systems. We'll use a small duct high velocity system or a Mitsubishi mini split. So the reason we decided to use that as our, I'll call it our baseline spec, is we have a lot of folks asking about passive house. And the first home we built was designed to passive house standards. And I think, and this is our experience, when you're building a rectilinear box, right, there's a lot of surface area for heat escape. And so you basically just have to insulate the heck out of this building. Now, maybe when you have a more, a square shaped building that's multifamily, but the cost, the upfront cost of passive house was too steep for the types of end users we were trying to serve. So we felt that the zero energy ready home program for the Department of Energy was a good bang for your buck, so to speak. You're getting a lot of the benefits of that, of going to passive house with less of the upfront cost.
So you talk about energy efficiency and well-insulated homes, and you probably use double pane or triple pane windows too. How else is our modules homes different than all the homes that you see built out in the suburbs in a couple of months?
So we have a 2x6 wall with exterior insulation. So we have more insulation in the walls, roof and floor of our buildings. Our window, I think our U values are like 0.28 or below, depending on the project. So we're those, double or triple pane windows. We've used some window products from Europe, which are really amazing. We love that. Supply chains have been challenging, and that's disrupted that a little bit. And then we have an energy recovery ventilator in our homes. So an ERV in each house. And that's kind of, I think of that as almost like the lungs of the house. It's circulating fresh air in, pushing sterile air out.
Constantly, yeah.
And then these high performance HVAC systems are using less energy, than a standard system, and they're sized appropriately. There's a couple of other things that we do, but that's, I guess, some of the big items, I would call it.
So you briefly mentioned Europe, and Europe is way ahead of the States in terms of modular housing, prefab housing. And I spoke to Ken Semler. You've probably heard of him. He's in the offsite modular industry too. And his theory was that after World War II, people in Europe were more willing to accept what was given to them because their homes had been decimated and they had to build really fast. So there's like a psychological difference in what people want when they're looking for homes in Europe versus in the States. So do you see when you talk to customers in Pittsburgh, is it hard to not force, but like bring down all the options out there to like to 5 options and say, can you pick one of these? Or people still want to customize and have their like thumbprint on their home?
So that's a great question, and I think so. There's 2 parts of that. One is you as the company, or I'm sorry, we as the company, right? We can set up expectations for our customers through our website, through our FAQs.
That's true.
And so that's one way we can control the options and narrative of working with us, right? Ultimately, we choose the customers that we want to, right? We sign a contract with them, we choose that. And so there's part of it. I'll talk about that in a second. The first thing on kind of the culturally, I think the idea of, the American dream, owning a house, owning your own home is so individualistic. And it is, so I think that's part of it, is like, we're much more driven by individualism in the United States. So it's mine. It feels like it's mine. It looks like it's mine, even though the color is weird, it's my weird color, right? So I think there's part of that exists in the United States. I think the other factor is that people, we have this mentality of bigger is better. And you've seen that in size of cars and meals and everything. So I think the consumers come with that mindset. I want it to be mine, and I want it to be as big as I can get, right? We Americans love buying in bulk, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, but when people approach you, aren't they trying to downsize what they currently have? So the people approaching you are very different than the other
That's right.
people out on the market looking for other homes in the suburbs.
That's right. Yes, you're correct. So they're looking for something different. They're looking for something considerably smaller, but not, I wouldn't call what we do by any means tiny houses, like 1,000, let's call it a starter sized home, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. And initially, we would do a lot of customization in our homes, and we were building one-off homes for one-off customers, like the Latham House. And I think what we learned in that process of our first number of homes, that I would call it semi-custom, where they could customize the inside, was that consumer is benchmarking that home to the home that's in their dreams, right? Their dream home. Everybody used to want to be an architect, when they were growing up, and they're like, this is my chance. So they're benchmarking success based on their dream home, which is a really hard bar to meet. Versus now what we're doing, which is where we're going out and being a developer and building spec homes, because we believe we know what the market needs. And now we're serving housing providers, so developers, whether it's a nonprofit developer, for-profit developer, we're serving them. So it's kind of a B2B2C model. So for example, in the spec homes that we built, so just 2 doors down, we sold an affordable house and a market rate house. And what were they benchmarking that house compared to was the other homes on the market in Pittsburgh, right? Which is the house across the street that needs $150,000 of work and has a leaky roof. So it's a very different comparable, I think. And I think that Offsite is very well set up to serve this more repeatable, standardized product. So that's where we've kind of pivoted to serve housing providers and for us to be a developer ourselves. So we can get the benefits of the factory into the customer's hands.
I'm sorry, my doorbell's ringing. So when you were getting your company set up, did you travel to Europe and look at their automated prefab and offsite construction? Are you trying to implement any of their models here in the States when you set up your own factory? Because you said you're currently working with other manufacturers right now.
Mhm. So we have not made any trips over to Europe to see what they're up to, and to Japan, right? Those are two, I think, areas that it's on my list to be going to. I would say we did see a lot of factories in the United States, and like, so our very first home, the Latham House, was built by Benson Wood, and they're out of New Hampshire, and they have a Hundiger machines in there. So they actually have a lot of relationships with Europe. So they're using a lot of the practices that a lot of these European panel manufacturers or other companies are using. So I call Benson Wood, they have the grass-fed wall panel. That's what Benson Wood does. So seeing their facility was probably the closest thing that I've seen to what's going on in Europe or Japan.
So recently you announced the Last Mile Lab initiative, a program. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So at the end of last year, one of the 50 largest foundations in the world, the Richard King Mellon Foundation, same foundation that funded the steel industry in the United States, launched a social impact investing program. And they wanted ideas for the region to improve the region and stimulate, economic growth. And we submitted to their pitch competition with the idea that Pittsburgh needs a factory. We're short, I think it's 57,000 homes in this region, just in this region. And so we have a shortage here. We have a lot of old, big empty buildings with great bones that used to produce steel and pipe. So there's all of this old industrial buildings. So what we pitched them was, what if we could have a clean advanced manufacturing facility that takes over one of these old former industrial sites that could produce the much needed affordable and market rate housing in the Pittsburgh region, and could help us get to our 2050 goals as a city, right? Which is pushing toward net zero. So that's what we pitched them, and they said, that's a great idea. And they made an investment, and they're now helping us take on that challenge of opening a facility that could produce several hundred homes a year and provide tens, if not 100 jobs in the region, and produce a lot of the housing we need, but then produce it at a level that puts modular, let's say, above the expectation, if you will, because most people hear modular and they think, oh, does it have wheels on it? Is it a permanent structure? So this facility would be building to that zero energy ready home standard, and would be really pushing the envelope. So that's our big goal. Prior to doing that, we are opening up what we're calling the Last Mile Lab in Pittsburgh. So to have a factory, you need to have people, right? You need trained people. So at the Last Mile Lab in Pittsburgh, we're starting a workforce training program around trades associated with modular construction. So we've partnered with a local trade institute of Pittsburgh. It's called the Trade Institute of Pittsburgh. They have a training program for carpentry, masonry, and some other trades. So they're becoming our workforce training partner. And this year we will have 5 individuals from the Pittsburgh area going through that program, learning just basic construction trades. And then we're going to be taking them on some modular education activities. So going up to a factory, seeing some of our project sites, doing some job shadowing opportunities. So that's one component of the Last Mile Lab. And then the other component will be a 10,000 square foot space where we can test how far can we push things being built in the factory, if that makes sense. So for example, a lot of factories don't do countertop, they don't do siding in the factory. Let's test those things. How can we install them in a way that's perhaps closer to the final resting spot for the home, so that we can get more work done in the factory? So we're going to be testing interior finishes, exterior finishes, but then we're going to invite building product manufacturers who are banging on the doors of the factory saying, we want to figure out how to install insulation in the factory. We want to figure out how to install cabinets in the factory. But the fact that's falling on deaf ears, because the factories are busy and they have backlogs. So this last mile lab will be an opportunity for those same building product manufacturers to test it in our, let's call it a micro factory, and then we can build case studies and bring those up to the larger supply chain.
Because
So
it's
that's
hard
what
to
we'll be doing.
balance research and at the same time while you're drowning under all this demand for housing right now. So it's very interesting. So you'll be able to split your time into two. And do you see this lab running on its own while you take on like day-to-day production?
So the lab will, it's like the MVP for our bigger factory, if you will. And the things that we learn in that lab, we will apply up into production.
Okay. So during your growth period over the last couple of years, has this supply chain issue, the chaos that's been going on for a while now, how has that affected your business?
It's so backlogs, we would place an order at the factory and 6 weeks later, it would go on the production line. Now you place an order and 7 months later, it's going on the production line. So while modular used to be faster, we never were about it being cheaper, better and faster. Now it's better, but it may not be faster. And that's a huge challenge when you're trying to increase adoption of offsite construction. So that has been a huge challenge. Is the backlogs of many factories have grown due to the pandemic. They are having their own labor supply shortages. Lead times for a lot of materials have gone up significantly. And so that's just been a strain on the industry in general. And we're seeing the results of that.
How have you dealt with it?
So part of dealing with it is controlling more of our own destiny, right? So we are starting to get more vertical integration, right? A path to that. So that's one way we're going to be dealing with it. If at least we're dealing directly with the problems versus through another. We're also bringing some partners into our company who own pieces of the supply chain throughout the United States. So I won't mention specific names, but large manufacturers of building products are becoming part of our company. So we'll have direct ties and direct lines to know down upstream what's going on. So those are two ways we've dealt with it.
That's very interesting. So you hear of the problem a little earlier and you can prepare for it or something.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So right now y'all are constructing these homes with traditional stick building, right? Have you considered any other types of building, be it metal or something else?
So we, for our foundation systems, we use a precast concrete foundation system for our homes. As far as the structure above, a lot of the existing mod factories are wood frame on the East Coast. So we've been doing 100% wood frame. We've done different types of framing. So that panelized house was a TGI joist, actually, super thick wall with blow and cellulose insulation. But for the most part, it's board and batten with exterior insulation in a mod factory. We've looked at metal stud. During the pandemic, with the lumber prices spiking, there were actually some factories that converted over because it made sense for them to do that. So we haven't done anything with wood frame or 3D printing or anything like that yet. I think the building type that we're doing is still a residential, townhome, single family home. So I think if we were doing taller buildings, then we would probably look into, steel frame.
And you do want to apply this module system to apartment buildings too, right? Larger scale buildings.
Yeah, that's right. So the ultimate goal of module is to enable more people to become home builders and developers. So we have a shortage of 4 to 5 million homes in the United States. And there are plenty of developers and builders that are out there, but we need more people to enter into that industry to increase supply. So our thinking is, what if we could develop a product and process that makes it easier to develop new housing, right? So you have the product itself, which I'm sitting in. You have standard operating procedures, kind of a QA/QC protocol and manual, the IKEA manual, if you will. So that, let's say, Belinda, if you were going to go and buy land, right, in your neighborhood, for you to coordinate all of those subcontractors and do that would be pretty difficult. But if you could buy a product from us and then have much less, let's call it subcontractors or local labor to be coordinating, then you could potentially build more homes than otherwise. So that's our kind of ultimate model, is to help more people enter the housing development business using our product and services.
Would that be something you franchise out? That idea?
I don't know if it would be franchised or how we would do it.
But that's
but
your
we are
initial
working
idea right now.
Yeah, that's our initial idea right now. And we do have our first developer customers that are working with us. So a nonprofit developer in Pittsburgh that's building affordable for sale housing. And then we have a number of developers on the East Coast that we're now working with. So we're enabling them to build a module brand of home in their neighborhoods. So we're testing that out right now.
It's very exciting. But like you said, I mean, the modular construction and offsite construction has so much potential, but that potential can only be unlocked if it scales up. If we have more people entering that industry, once we start moving away from the current way of building and into this new way of building, or what I believe is really the future. But it's a very interesting approach. So what's Module's plans for the rest of the year and maybe for the coming years?
So we'll be opening the last mile lab in the third quarter this year. We have a number of projects that are under construction right now in Pittsburgh, and then a few projects in the East Coast that we'll be starting. So those will be great test cases for projects outside of our home market. And then in 3 years, having a factory that produces 200 homes a year that can serve multiple geographies. So it's called a regional factory. And that factory will give priority to developers that are building affordable housing, because that's what the critical supply that we need. So when we set up our factory, we want to incent developers who are working on, let's call it workforce housing, affordable housing, kind of below market housing, with priority. So that's in the plan. And then I think the other part of what we're doing is educating the other, we talked about affordable housing, all the parties that touch building a home, and lending. Lending is a huge pain point for modular construction because lenders, at least construction lenders that we're familiar with, are used to building homes, with draws for each progress payment.
Yeah.
But the factory is a big bulk draw, and the banks don't like funding that. So right now, one of the pain points that I'm seeing in the industry is that a construction, let's say you were to build 5 houses and get a construction loan for that, and you hired us to build those homes. We would need paid once we've built them and they're being shipped to you. But your bank would not pay for that until it's installed on the foundation and an inspector can come out and look at it. So the month between when we're done building them and you're finished installing them, that's on you, Belinda. You have to fork out the money for that. And that makes it really hard for developers, especially small scale developers, to do projects modular. So that is another problem that we'll be working on in the future.
You'll be working with banks or something to change the way they
either work with them or create new financing mechanisms.
Right? That's awesome. That's great. We need someone to disrupt that market.
Yeah, it's critical. I think it's critical for adoption, because the contractor can be on board, the client can be on board, but if the bank says no, if he or she who holds the purse string says no, then it's out of the question. So we need to create solutions for that.
That's very exciting. Well, if people want to contact you and learn more about modular, what's the best way for them to do that?
So they could go to our website, modulehousing.com, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then my email is brian@modulehousing.com. I'd love to chat with folks.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for sharing everything about the company and your plans for the future. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
So what I liked about Brian's company was that he's taking the vernacular of Pittsburgh and the Midwest in these row houses, and that's the type of modular construction he's doing. He's not creating a six-sided box that he thinks is going to solve everyone's problems.
I completely agree with you. There are a lot of good things about this company. It seems like he started off with grand visions, which we all did straight out of school. And then he faced reality and scaled back. And he's finally defined the problem, defined his solution to the problem, and is running with it. And that's what's really important, defining what area in the country or in the world you're going to tackle, what type of problem you're going to address, and what your solution to the problem is.
Yeah, because what he does would probably not work in, let's say, California or in Texas or on the other side of the world. Whereas someone like Boxable, another popular modular construction company, creates these ADU buildings that work in California. That's where the demand is. That's not the demand in Pittsburgh or in Texas or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a one solution fits all when it comes to construction.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were saying about modular construction. It's so vague that people think that it's modular construction is the six-sided box that's going to work everywhere.
So he's created like a subset in modular construction, a row home off-site build.
Which is similar to what Ken Simler, who's also does modular construction.
The proportions of his buildings are slightly different. They're slightly larger.
And there's plenty of room for more companies in that space that do all these different things.
But maybe we tackle them, like each company tackles a specific type of building.
And that'd be great, because I would love to see modular construction overtake conventional construction.
And what's great about Brian's module company is that the proportions of the building kind of work with trailers.
Yeah, because if you've seen a row house before, if like I lived in Texas my whole life and then went up to Cincinnati and saw these skinny but long homes, and I thought that was really, really weird, but it was the style. It's what they did, and that works out really well for him as far as fitting that on a truck.
And we went to Louisiana a couple of years ago, and they have shotgun houses there.
Yeah, shotgun style homes.
It's very similar to row homes.
I think of those more as single stories, but of course our perception is the one district that was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina, and the Brad Pitt and Frank Gehry homes that were built there. So they're trying to mimic the vernacular of Louisiana or New Orleans, but it didn't seem to work.
No, it didn't. But I think shotgun homes are slightly different because you enter on one side of the building and there is a clear circulation path through the other end. Whereas with row homes, it can have more variation. That's just I think so.
And a lot of these shotgun homes, they seem to be lifted off. And I guess that's because of the potential for flooding to come through. It's kind of like, because I'm obsessed with Le Corbusier, apparently, it's kind of like Villa Savoye, where there's a lot of open outdoor space on the first floor.
What's the district that was affected by Katrina?
I want to say District 9, but that's that really cool movie we just watched. Oh, the Ninth Ward.
Lower Ninth Ward, you're right.
So something I thought of that was really interesting when watching that interview with Brian was he talked about how Pittsburgh used to be this booming city, and because they had steel, or they created steel there. And I thought there was this interesting comparison where Pittsburgh had steel at one time. That was what made their economy go, and that's where people went for the jobs. And eventually it ended, and the town became a ghost town, really. And they've just now gotten to the point where they could revive it, and they've had to switch gears to something else. And a very, very similar comparison is Detroit. who had automobiles in the early 20th century. And it was the booming city. It was the place to go. That's where all the jobs were. Well, as we know, that's moved off. I mean, that's moved out of Detroit, and Detroit's a dead city now, and they're trying to do something else. Well, I was trying to think of what's going on in today's world that's booming that could eventually be phased out, and it's location-wise, it's Silicon Valley, in my opinion, and it's this silicon craze, it's this startup craze, it's this technology craze.
Yeah, and we've seen a bubble being created in Austin, like a mini Silicon Valley, the next Silicon Valley, but it's not going to be the same thing. It'll be something else. It'll be called something else. It will host different companies. But it seems like that's growing pretty quickly. That might be the next little ecosystem.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine that, and I'm sure it was the same way in Pittsburgh or Detroit in the past, but Silicon Valley at some point will be a ghost town. And I guess what happened with Pittsburgh is steel manufacturing moved
Offshore.
off to the other side of the world. And then the same with automobile manufacturing. Japan was doing it better. And it was cheaper to do in Mexico and Canada. And it's just cheaper elsewhere. So at what point? I mean, everything's already made in China as far as technology goes. So at what point is it going to transition?
It's just cycles. It's just natural cycles that we go through.
So it's almost like these towns that have been abandoned need to either completely change gears or embrace the past and somehow create a memorial to what it once was. Like Pittsburgh seems to have tried to change gears. Same with Detroit, but at the same time, there might be a case where you create sort of a museum to what the city was.
But do you think that can be as successful? Because then you come off as just being nostalgic and clinging to the past that no longer exists.
People love nostalgia.
They love nostalgia for like a visit as tourism.
Tourism can be great for your economy.
Take Dubai, for example.
Tourism is the majority of the economy in a lot of places. Like think of Rome, Italy or something. They embraced what it was. I mean, that's on a different scale. But imagine if Detroit did something like that. That'd be really cool.
Or even Pittsburgh. Like when we visited Pittsburgh, we went to these Cary blast furnaces, and I think I mentioned this to Brian. And it was a little disappointing that it isn't as popular as some of the other sites in Pittsburgh, but it was so cool. It was romantic, and it gave you a taste of Pittsburgh's history. It's this old abandoned factory that's all rusted, but it gives you a glimpse into the past. And they hold concerts there. There's certain like sculptures over there, but it's more like a young hippie, like a destination. It's not as touristy as it could be. So with what Brian is doing is embracing some of those abandoned factories and abandoned buildings in Pittsburgh, and he's looking to convert them into off-site construction factories. And that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, because right now he actually outsources to different modular construction companies for his specific needs, and he's going to eventually build a factory in Pittsburgh.
So if you keep the shell of the building and acknowledge the past, but on the inside you gut it and have some like futuristic or the next generation of construction going on inside the building, that's a cool
Homage to the past.
Homage to the past.
Yeah, I like that idea, especially when it comes to stadiums, like football stadiums. It's really sad to see these old football stadiums be demolished, and just think about all the energy that it took for those to be constructed. And I still remember the day where I heard a boom outside, and it was Texas Stadium in Irving, Texas, being demolished. And that was a piece of history. And like, why can't that be taken and turned into something else? Like, respect what it was, but at the same time, convert it into something new. I guess people just don't need that right now in the States. We have so much land and money that we just don't.
Very wasteful.
Yeah.
And there's this one saying I heard somewhere, like the most eco-friendly building is a building that doesn't need to be built.
Yeah, I used to say that at a time whenever I was big on studying for the LEED exam. It was always the greenest building is to not have one.
So in addition to these modular homes that he's building, when Brian eventually and his company eventually sets up their own factories, repurposing old buildings is going to set his company apart from other companies. It's one of those talking points in his company.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the things that's holding his company back right now is supply chain issues, and that's the same for all companies. But one of the benefits that he mentioned about modular construction, and their modular construction in particular, is that it's faster. Well, supply chain issues have totally disrupted that. So now one of the major benefits that modular construction provides does not exist.
So as the saying goes, cheap, fast, good, pick two. So with modular construction, they were not cheaper because they're an up-and-coming industry. They haven't scaled up. But they were faster and they were better. They had potential to be better than traditional construction. But because of supply chain issues, they're no longer faster. They could only be better. And is that enough?
Right, because you're going to have to pay a premium for it at the moment because it's not to the scale that conventional construction is.
And it's very sad, like right when there's an interest in it and it's starting to possibly change the industry, just there's the setback, and it's a huge hurdle for them to face.
So in the podcast, Brian mentioned that there exists a housing shortage and we need more homes and we need more developers. And that's so true in today's market. I mean, the homes are selling like crazy for outrageous prices. And it's just that we need more supply. And so hopefully companies like this can help ramp up supply. And hopefully there's more companies out there. It doesn't matter what kind of company it is, as long as they're building a quality home, it can help increase the supply.
But that's the problem when there's such a gap between demand and supply. When there's this voracious appetite for homes right now, there's automatically going to be a drop in quality because there's so much demand. You just want to satisfy that demand. You're not going to be producing quality homes. And we've already seen quality drop over the past couple of decades. And it's scary to think of the quality of homes dropping even further because sure, you can create this, you can satisfy the demand right now, but how long are those homes going to last? If they last 20 years and our population continues to increase for the next 20 years or so, then we're going to have to address that increased demand in 20 years, plus all these homes that have deteriorated. It's going to exacerbate the problem down the line.
That kind of reminds me of homes built pre-2008, let's say from like 2004 to 2007, which we actually had. We had a home built at that time and lived in it. And the quality of construction, I mean, you could tell it was bad. But they were just throwing up homes as fast as they could to meet demand. And then the financial crisis and the housing market crashed in 2008. And these homes are still there, but like you said, that quality, like how long are they going to really last?
And then it has a knock-on effect on other things because these poor quality homes are going to require more amounts of energy to run because they're not going to be insulated as well. So they're going to be energy guzzling homes, and we're building millions of these energy guzzling homes just to meet demand, and that's going to affect our demand for energy, and we're not going to be able to keep up. Like we're at a point where we can be building net zero homes or homes that can operate off the grid. But that's not a concern right now because we just want to build energy guzzling homes that will satisfy demand.
We just need homes.
And that's a scary thought.
So we need more homes built, but they need to be done well. And one of the proven methods to do that is to do it off-site, to do it in factories in a controlled environment through modular construction?
I would say it's proven. I feel like you can still cut corners in factories. I think there needs to be more of an education on what you're buying, like how does your home perform. So you're not just looking for a home to satisfy your need right now, but you're looking for a good quality home. Like imagine if you're starving, or if you're homeless. No, I'd say starving. You won't care about a really nutritious meal. You're going to accept a McDonald's burger because you're just famished right now. But that's not going to satisfy your hunger in the long run. It's not going to be good for your body than a nutritious meal, a more expensive meal would be.
Well, think about how much energy is wasted or consumed in third world countries because they're just doing anything they can to get by. They're not concerned with being green or conscious of the environment, really. They're concerned with their livelihood.
So that we went down a pretty dark path there, but I think I would like to talk to a lot of other similar modular construction companies and offsite construction companies, see how they are tackling all these issues of pent-up demand, of energy guzzling homes, and hopefully, I don't think there's one company out there that will solve everybody's problems, but it could be each of these companies has a different approach to the problem, has a unique approach, and they're solving it in effective ways, and we could put that together.
And hopefully you can bring awareness to these through your YouTube channel.
So I hope you enjoyed our discussion on modular and offsite construction. Join us next week for another episode on building science, products, and technology.